Welcome to this episode of Money Conversations with Everyday People. I'm your host, Rukayat Kolawale, and here today with Daphne Dickoff. Daphne, an ICF certified executive coach and founder of a leading consulting firm, brings over 25 years of experience in leadership development and organizational transformation. She has advised senior executives across Fortune 500 and DAX 40 companies, helping them unlock potential and elevate performance. An entrepreneur since 24, Daphne works globally with leaders, teams, and entrepreneurs, fostering confidence, value driven leadership. A speaker and author, she shares insights on leadership transformation and personal growth, inspiring meaningful change worldwide. Daphne, welcome. It's really fantastic to have you, and I'm looking forward to diving into a really important and often unspoken experience that can significantly impact our financial lives. The feeling of being a fraud or doubting our abilities, which we're calling imposter feelings. So, Daphne, when you hear the term imposter feeling in the context of finances, what really resonates with you the most?
Well, thanks first of all, Rukaid, for having me on this wonderful podcast. I think everything, right? When people are not feeling confident, and we call it imposter syndrome, imposter phenomenon, and the like, it's all about doubting ourselves, thinking we're not good enough, thinking we need to do more, and that has a huge impact on the finances. And I'm so glad we can dive into this in more detail.
Yeah, same here. I'm looking forward to our conversation, basically, and it's such an important topic when it comes to these imposter feelings. And can you share some ways that these feelings might have shown up in your own financial journey or in experiences of the people that you know?
Yes, for sure. So imposter feelings usually show up when we think, we're fooling other people's, everybody's convinced that we're good enough, but we don't think it. So we're thinking we're the fraud that is just about to be found out. And for me, it started with my very first job. When I was 23, I got a job in management consulting, and I remember being really excited when I got the offer. And then looking at the numbers, and I thought, I know this is less than, of what I've heard from colleagues and friends who've gotten other offers from consulting companies. And I was like, but I'm, lucky enough to get this job. I'm not good enough. Maybe they'll find out that I only did a bachelor's degree and I didn't have a master's. And so I didn't negotiate. I didn't say a word. And I think I didn't say anything for the first year. And not even for, not asking for a promotion, not asking for a raise. I was just hush it up, be quiet, make sure nobody notices you got a job. Maybe you're not supposed to have this job. You're not worth it. You're not
Mm,
good enough.
mm. I think you mentioned something regarding like negotiation, like you could not even like think about negotiation the salary.
Yeah.
And we often see how this can lead to things like even hesitating to invest. So, this imposter feeling and also feeling unqualified, like you mentioned, to negotiate a salary or even avoiding financial planning altogether. So, I'm not sure whether at that age of 23, you were thinking about financial planning or not, but obviously you mentioned the negotiating a salary or raise. And does that align with what you've seen of or experienced looking at, okay, from your when you were 23 till now, or what the journey has been like?
Yes. So I see it all over again. I see it when I talk to HR managers that they realize there's certain kind of people you can negotiate down better. I see it when I talk to leaders who are trying to fill up their team, our new hires coming on a lower level. And I see it when I talk to leaders and junior leaders trying to get promoted, trying to get a new job. They will not negotiate. They're often hesitant. They don't think they're entitled to negotiate. They're not entitled to work, to ask for more. They're just lucky enough to get that job. So this whole feeling of being inferior of not having that value, and that translates through to, how do I manage my finances? Who am I going to ask? I actually, at the time of 23, did, I'm coming from a financial background. My dad was in insurance, so I knew I needed to have some insurance, but I got definitely taken advantage of by that insurance person, the agent, because he was selling me all kinds of things that a 23-year-old didn't need, but I wasn't going to ask and doubt him because he was the expert, right? So yeah,
Mm.
it comes through all facets of life, I think.
Mm. I think you mentioned something which is quite interesting. You coming from a financial background, but still talking to an insurance person, basically. So you kind of see the power imbalance there as well. And I guess it's more looking at perhaps the financial education aspect of it, but not only that, also this imposter feeling of, oh no, this insurance person knows more than I do, so I'm not going to challenge what they're
Hmm.
saying. And what I've just thinking back now, with most of my clients now as well, like the one-to-one clients, they've been sold insurances that they did not need,
Yes.
lots of it, and it's taken like a headache for them to come out of those insurances, which is which goes into number one, financial education, but also this imposter feeling of I cannot challenge this person because I see this person as a person in authority and
Mhm.
probably know more than I do, right? When it comes to insurance. And at that very young age of 23, I mean, that is super, super early. And I think what we can start to do is really engage people on this knowledge, but also when to identify when these feelings creep up in them as well.
Mhm.
So it's really interesting as well how sometimes these feelings, right, can push us to kind of like overcompensate,
Mhm.
really, because you mentioned across the journey, you've also seen people in high position as well. And maybe by spending excessively on things that we think will make us look or feel more successful financially. Have you kind of noticed that dynamic as well? So perhaps with those like this
Yes,
way of
absolutely. And, I didn't notice it obviously when I was younger because I was doing it the same thing, but yes. So, overcompensating often, in younger years, or more junior years when people are in their job, often in, things that they might not need, like, tangible things. Later in leadership, leaders often who have imposter feelings or deal with imposter feelings often don't feel like they're good enough, they're adequate enough as a leader, and so they invest a lot also maybe in unnecessary training, maybe not the right training, not the right leadership development, but just so that they can say, I've done this training. So I work with a lot of senior leaders who said, well, I've done all of these leadership courses and I still don't feel like I'm a good leader. And when I talk with and work with entrepreneurs, it's very similar. Often people who want to become entrepreneurs don't dare to do that step. I don't have the financial backing. I'm not good enough. Who am I? I'm not the expert. Can't start my own company. And once they do start it, they use a lot of extra services and products, probably unnecessarily services and products, just so to make up for what they think they don't have, they don't know, they're not yet. Um, so there's a lot of money being spent, maybe not the most efficient way. That's
Mm.
what I see all the time.
Yeah, I think you touched upon that important aspect of just spending unnecessary money. And I think sometimes it leads to a feeling of constant external validation, right?
Mm.
Maybe not, or maybe always seeking advice. So, okay, I need this training, being overtrained. And I
Yeah,
always say that women are often over mentored and
yeah.
under-sponsored, right? And
Hmm.
not really trusting our own judgment. So not just only women, but I just brought that example in.
Yeah.
So how can this constant need of this needing constant external validation, not trusting our own judgments, how can that play out with our money?
So often, especially there's some certain people as well when they have imposter feelings that they feel good enough, but they feel like they have to go longer, further, more, right? Go extra miles and extra miles. So often, when they don't feel they got everything, that they're not good enough, or they have to go further, um, their investment strategy will need to be perfect, right? And it will need to be the best. And so they procrastinate. They just put it off because I'm not ready yet. Well, I want to do it perfectly, and I everything I do, I always do it perfectly. So perfectionism is often comes hand in hand. And until I can do it perfectly, I won't do it at all, right?
Mm,
And assuming that I have will have to be an expert in financial investing as well before I can do my financial strategy, and not thinking or not wanting to ask some for help. So that's an often we see that going hand in hand with people with imposter feelings. I got to do it on my own. I can't ask for help. That's a sign of weakness.
mm. And that really, really impacts financial planning. And let's talk specifically about investing. Okay, I've been my profession is investing basically, but I just want
Mhm.
to get your take on it when it comes to this imposter feelings, right? How can these feelings of inadequacy really prevent someone from even starting to invest or lead them to constant second guessing,
Yeah.
right? So kind of like the focus on kind of making mistakes, the fear of it as well. So how can these feelings prevent people? And
So there
so
is, with many people who, have these imposter feelings, there's also a fear of failure. So I cannot fail. I cannot do something wrong. I need to do something perfectly. As I said, I cannot ask for help. And if I make a mistake, then, I'll be found out. I'll look stupid. So I better not start even. Or I'll wait until I'm perfect, until I have all my facts. So there's a procrastination circle that starts because, and it's really a vicious circle because I will feel bad when I haven't done it because I know I should be investing, right? It's a smart thing to do, but I don't have all the facts. I don't feel confident yet. I'm going to wait. And the longer I wait, the more, the worse I feel about not doing it. And the more of a failure I actually feel because in this aspect of investing, I have failed because not doing anything is also a failure. So, um, it really has can have a big weight on people's shoulder. And I'll tell you a personal story. This was happening with me. I said with 23, I already got my financial planning and insurance is set, all the rows in a duck, but then I didn't do much. And then at one point I thought, let me smarten up and do this. But I just didn't have the time. And this is also how we got to meet again. Because at one point I said, there's no way I'm ever going to be an expert, and enough of an expert that I'm going to trust myself in doing it. And I know I need to get professional help. This is the right thing to do. And it felt like a huge weight off my shoulder because every year that passed, I knew I wasn't getting the interest of my investments that I should. And I felt more guilty and I put it off longer. And having written a book about the imposter phenomenon as well, I know all the strategies. So luckily, finally, I got into this. Okay, let's stop the vicious circle on my financial, um, you know, down spiral and get the help I need.
yeah, which is super important. And thanks for kind of sharing your story because we know that when we do not consistently invest, it can really hinder our long-term wealth. And like you mentioned, like when you were 23, obviously you were not thinking about this. But how do you see or have you seen how this fear, right, can really create a real financial barrier as well?
Yeah. So that's really the unhidden, the hidden costs of feeling like an imposter. So if you look at your whole career and there's been a study by Inuit, I think 2020, looking at the foregone costs or the opportunity costs of not negotiating your salary, of not asking for that raise, or accepting a lower offer. As I mentioned before, that has happened to me. It really can have the estimate was about 7,500 US dollars per year that you could get more. Now, this might not seem so much to some people, but if, accumulated over a lifetime, it's really a lot. Yeah. And so just not asking for that raise, not asking for that promotion, or when you're looking for a new job, maybe not looking for the higher job, but just for looking for a job that you already know how to do, doesn't stretch you, that doesn't make you uncomfortable, you're
Mm.
leaving money on the table.
Exactly. And just to do a quick math with that 7,500 US dollars, if you were to invest that, or if someone was to invest that at a 10% interest, so let's say on an annualized basis, right, over
Mhm.
40 years, that comes to 3.35 million US dollars. So this is really, really important, like you mentioned, when it comes to salary negotiations. So the difference between 7,500 and getting that and actually taking that money and investing it, it's a huge compounding effects as kind of done the quick and dirty
Yeah.
calculation there, which is super, super important.
And
And
super
really,
scary if you think of it, right? That's the
yes,
money we leave on the table. That's what we could be investing just by not asking for a raise, just by not trusting ourselves enough to ask for little bit of money. Because all that can happen is somebody can say no. They're not going to fire you just because you're asking for a raise or a higher salary to start with.
exactly. Because if you never ask, then you never know
Yeah.
at the end of the day. So I always say, just ask, like you said. The worst thing is they say no, and then you keep asking, or maybe it's another job somewhere, basically.
There are also other benefits that you could be asking for, right? It could be starting a negotiation. It doesn't even need to be higher salary. It could be something else, which is also worth money, which then at
Mhm.
the end of the day doesn't need to go from your bank account, but could go from your employer. So there are endless possibilities if we start thinking about it.
Yes, exactly. And it's kind of good that you mentioned that because I just did a podcast with an amazing lady, Nadia, where we talked about all the ways that we can receive compensation where the employer can really help us. And this ultimately impacts our bottom line. So especially
Mhm,
in the
mhm,
aspects of financial well-being as well.
mhm,
So, moving along,
mhm.
avoiding financial planning altogether seems like a significant consequence. And what do you think these feelings lead to that avoidance, and what are the potential downsides to this?
Mhm. Well, that downward spiral, right? You're thinking that you don't know enough yet to invest, and that you're going to leave it for another day. That feels for a moment a good choice because I can't make a wrong decision. But then, in hindsight, as you just did with the math as well, those 3.3 million, it's a huge mistake not to do it. So putting off a decision can make us in the short term feel better, but if we look back long term, it's going to make us really feel uncomfortable, and then we might feel even as the bigger failure. So when I deal with people who have imposter feelings, it's often to look what's the worst case scenario you can do. Like you're not asking for this raise or you're not investing now. What's the worst case that can happen? What's the best case that can happen? And imagine there is a mistake that's not the perfect strategy. Again, what's the worst that can happen and the best? And then often we realize the worst case scenario we had in our minds are not really probable. Actually,
Mm.
they're so improbable that we might as well go and actually make that mistake. And there's so much learning and making mistakes because that's where you can pivot your strategies. That's where you can actually grow. So it's worth making those mistakes in any aspects of our lives.
Exactly. Like you pointed out, that is where growth comes, right? Because if we don't make a mistake or if we don't fail, then we never know what is on the other end of the spectrum. And I think you really touched upon something that I always say that even if you haven't started, start now when it comes to
Mhm,
financial planning. I mean, the
mhm.
best time was yesterday, the
Yes.
next best time is today.
Yeah.
So I want to go into some other aspects of this when it comes to some because sometimes when I something I really think is really important to discuss is the concept of this imposter feeling, imposter phenomenon. As been largely based on Western experiences, right? Because I can come talk about my own experience coming as a Nigerian and moving over to the Western world when I was a teenager to study and then ultimately working in the finance industry. So, what are your thoughts on how cultural backgrounds might shape these feelings differently?
Yeah. So I want to say, and I do coach around the globe, so I'm really fortunate to have firsthand experience of all of this. Um, there might be cultures where it is not acceptable to speak it out, right? Where you just suck it up and you do it. Um, my on the surface you could say that doesn't happen. um Second of all, it is sort of a privilege. It's a luxury to think about these thoughts, right? So you have to have enough um financial security, enough money on the table that you can think or dare to say, oh, I'm not going to do this because I might fail. There are some background where you just have to do it and try, right, whether you fail or not. Having said that, I the fear of failure, I've seen this is across many cultures, and I've been working closely with a PhD student with a Chinese background, and at the moment they now are a professor, but their fear really was, I need to be the best in everything. So it was more of, I need to show my parents that it was worth it to invest in me in my studies. So failure was not an option. And at the same time, well, if you looked at that person from the outside, failure was not an option. That person did brilliantly, rose, through all the academic titles that you can have, and published beautifully, amazingly, and really good papers in really amazing academic journals. Yet still, in the conversation with me, I understood that there was sometimes a fear of failure that was paralyzing. That there that this person could have done so much more had they trusted, had they been confident, had they thought, I am enough, I am doing well, and that's all I can never be 100% an expert. So that's
Mm,
one example. I have also worked with recently with a PhD student from a South African country, and there the fear was more, I have to finish this. I got to do this. It doesn't matter what I do, except for maybe I need to stay healthy, right? So I cannot sacrifice my mental health to this. So I want to say it comes in different forms.
mm,
And there have been a lot of studies with minority groups that the fear of failing, the fear of not being good enough is just imminent. It's all over. So it doesn't even qualify for them as imposter feelings because it's things that they've known all their lives. Um, yeah. And while we say, this is culturally dependent, in some cultures, it doesn't matter though. You still have to do it, right? So um, I see it all over. I might be labeled differently.
mm. That's interesting. Like the different cultural landscape. So if I just bring my own culture, basically,
Mhm,
just to give a bit of a context there, because my culture is it's Nigerian, but okay,
mhm,
my Yoruba culture when it comes to growing up and all that. Because I think we had this discussion earlier as well when it comes to imposter feeling, and I'm thinking I don't even feel that because when it was more of when you come to the Western world, right, and you have all these nuances coming up and all these systemic issues, but then having have a strong identity from growing up in this culture kind of prepares you for being like having a great identity and not having any systemic structures tell you or who you are meant to be and not having that confidence. I guess it's all about different confidence level at the end of the
mm,
day. This is how I see it, and I always kind of, I know we've had this discussion before as well when we look at money, right? Obviously, we're talking about money now. So money in my culture of Yoruba culture, the women kind of control the money. So in this context is like what imposter feeling is there when it comes to like really managing your finances, but also when it comes to attaining the education level. So compare that to the Chinese people as well. Like in Nigerian parents, you have to be either a doctor, a lawyer, or
Yeah.
an engineer, basically, and you have to be the best in whatever you do. But then I don't think it's as strong and very much fear driven as other cultures because we still have other things that we kind of fall back on. So it's yeah, I would say there will be some aspects of it, but when I talk to a lot of my friends that we kind of have the same cultural background. We just think, huh, what is this imposter feeling? But I'm getting it from you now. Like obviously, it differs from different upbringing and wherever we are from. And I think it's also crucial to kind of acknowledge that for many, really particularly those from marginalized groups. So when we talk about marginalized groups, uh, I always look at it in the context of the Western world because these feelings aren't just internal. So we
Yeah.
have systemic issues like racism, sexism, classism, and this can create a real barrier and for feelings of not belonging or not being good enough. So have you seen how the societal biases kind of play into this narrative?
A little bit, and I think what I've noticed with most of my clients as well, imposter feelings are the strongest with people who don't speak about it. So, for example, your background in Nigeria, if everybody talks about you got to be a lawyer, you got to be a doctor or an engineer, and and financial backing is important, and we talk about from early age. I'm from a Swiss heritage. In my culture, it was we don't talk about money, we have money almost, right? So you cannot discuss salaries, you cannot discuss what's on the bank account. It's just a hush topic. And I just like very generalized, obviously, does not count for everybody. But um, that means also I cannot speak about worries about money, right?
Mm,
Um, I can also not speak about that I don't feel good enough, that I'm feeling inferior. So what I'm getting at, in cultures where things are expected and nobody talks about it, and I don't have any studies to prove that, but that's just my experience. When you don't talk about it, it becomes more of an issue, and people
mm,
are suffering internally more. When there's cultures where we all openly talk about it, this is what is expected. Everybody, and I've talked with lots of people in the United States coming from countries where there's a similar expectation, what you've just discussed, right? But they openly talk about it, so I think it's a non-issue. But when we don't talk about it and when we think we're the only one out, we are the odd one out, we are weird, it's the only one, we are the only one who think like that, I think then it becomes an issue. And that has a lot to do with socialization of our individual nucleus families, but also the societies we grow up in. And then the societies, if we, migrate, the societies we are coming into and how the experience is, how we're being integrated or not.
mm. Good. Yeah, that's quite interesting. And how might these cultural expectations around like success, failure, and self-worth really influence how we experience these feelings around money? What would
Yeah.
you say about that?
Yeah. If if, for example, the one Chinese professor I was working with, failure was not an option, right?
Mm,
Their parents were expecting them to be a doctor, engineer, or a lawyer, and achievement was something that was non-negotiable. So that goes for money as well. So the first negotiation on when they became a professor, asking for a salary, a higher one, was I need to succeed. I cannot fail. I'm going to accept any salary they're giving me because I need to prove to my parents that I made it. Right.
mm,
So directly correlated by the more stress we put on ourselves, the less well we can negotiate. The more fear of losing this opportunity. And it goes for all negotiations. When you're going into a negotiation and you think you have some cards up your sleeve, right? Then you negotiate in a different way than if you think this is my only chance, all my money on one color, you know?
Mm, mm. It's really a good one that you've mentioned there as well. And I think it also goes into when we talk about sponsorship as well. So
Mhm.
sponsoring, because the imposter feeling can also creep in, and we don't know how to ensure that we actually kind of let perhaps our managers, right, when the time comes to do the salary negotiation, let them know how we're performing, what we're achieving, and feel like, oh my God, I'm achieving so much, but how do I kind of mention that to my manager, who will ultimately at some point be your sponsor, right? So because when we talk about sponsorship, it's really someone that has a social currency to really open doors for you. But if they do not understand how you are performing or the exceeding expectation, then they might not be able to give you that social currency that will open the door for you to move up, and perhaps ultimately increase in salary comes into place as well. So there is aspects of community, right? So the support of a strong community can be super, super vital when we talk about these imposter feelings. And how can having this network, those networks, the community networks, mentors, but also sponsors that I kind of mentioned, how can how can like having those groups help to really challenge those feelings of isolation and inadequacy?
Yeah. Oh, it's such an important question, Rakayat. It's all about, um, as I said before, speaking about it, right? Talking about it, bringing it out, um, and being brave enough. And I'm saying brave because people who feel like they are an imposter, there needs to be some kind of courage to actually say, I'm brave enough to ask for help. Yeah, I don't need to do this on my own. And I'm actually outing myself to confine in my manager or in my friend or in a mentor and share openly what some of the issues are that I have or some of the worries. So there's three things that can really help. When you have a mentor, it or a role model, it's really helpful to hear their story. How are they dealing with similar situations? Hearing, normalizing it. Oh, they might have had similar thoughts about, not wanting to invest or not asking for a raise as me. Um, that's the aspect of mentorship, maybe role model. If you're talking more community peers, there is hugely helpful to say the first one who dares to say, right, I feel like this, I sometimes have doubts, and then you can almost be 100% sure, certain 99 or 80 to 99 people will say, oh, I've been there at one point in my life, and then all of a sudden, whew, it feels less of a a weird thing, a scary thing. It's normalized. That can be hugely important. And then the third aspect, I think, is like a fact reality check. As soon as you confide in someone and you tell them what you think, they will put a mirror in front of you and they will say, this is not how I see you, or this is not how I'm experiencing you. This is totally different. I see you as that and that. And usually, that's what many people who feel like imposters have in common. They think less of themselves. They think they need to do more than what people around them think. So having that reality check, somebody speaking back to them and saying, no, 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 this is not the reality. This is how it. Eventually, when enough people around you tell you that, it sinks in.
Mm. And that goes in nicely to kind of building a financial confidence as well, basically. So what would you say are the practical steps that people can take to start overcoming these financial imposter feelings?
Yeah. Excuse me. First thing really is what we've been talking about it. We got to acknowledge there is something there, right? We got to acknowledge, hey, I sometimes don't feel like I'm good enough, big enough, strong enough, smart enough, like I need to go the extra mile. And once you put this in the open with yourself or with others, that's the first step. Then you can move on. Okay, done that, been there, now what? And then build your own strategy to
Mm.
deal with it.
So what would be this like first aid strategies? So those quick things that we can do when these negative thoughts creep in, because they can creep in whenever.
Yeah. So usually we have some negative thought patterns that we've been, you know, doing, learning, performing in our heads. And that just is the normal reaction to when there's a trigger, when we feel a bit maybe challenged, then all of a sudden, oh, I'm not good enough. Oh, they're going to find out I'm a fraud. Oh, and once we recognize that, so really recognize what are those thought patterns? We call them automatic negative thoughts. Um, what's happening and when does that happen? And then to take a pause, just to find something, I want to almost say like a diversion, to stop that automatic cycle that usually happens, and interact, intervene, and act in a different way. So this could be anything from taking a few deep breaths, from if you're on a video call saying, ooh, bad connection, and maybe doing a few jumps or a stretch, anything that gets you out of that mental spiraling that normally happens.
Mm. And I think it's building resilience. It's extremely, extremely crucial,
Yeah,
irrespective of what kind of resilience it is,
yeah,
financial resilience or emotional resilience or whatever it is. So, how can we get better at bouncing back from financial setback and
yeah,
acknowledging our progress?
yeah. And that is really sort of a more middle to long term strategy. And it is things like doing things and making mistakes and learning from these failures, right? Not to have shame when you fail, but actually to learn from them. So the minute we look back and we list all our achievements, we list all our failures, and we derive where has that brought us, what have we learned out of them, that's when we can start building slowly but surely resilience. It's those uncomfortable spots, those challenges that seem just a little bit out of our reach,
Yeah.
that make us a little bit uncomfortable, not totally paralyzed. Those are the ones where we can grow. And we said that before in this call already. That's where growth happens, when
Mm.
we give ourselves a little bit of a challenge every so often to stretch ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And I think seeking support is also super, super important because we can't do it all.
Yeah.
And what would you say are the benefits of working with a financial advisor, a coach, or even a therapist in addressing these feelings?
I think in as for in financial aspects, in leadership aspects, in mental aspects, they're professionals to support you. And once you're acknowledged that, hey, I sometimes do feel like I have imposter feelings, and I don't need to do everything on my own, right? To just reach out and see who can help you in your network, but also from professionals that are there to guide you. Then you have a structured way of working through the topics that might still bother you, to
Mm.
get solutions, to get tools, to get strategies put in place that long term, you always have a support, right? And it's helpful not just to go in one way, but to diversify a bit, like when you do your finances, to make sure you have different kind of support systems in place, different people or groups that can help you.
Yeah. And I think we've kind of worked together. And how was that important to you, just to get the listeners on a personal journey as well when it comes to financial planning and as financial advisor?
Yes. So I think what's important is to pick the person up where they are at, right? So it's not about people who have imposter feelings, like myself, have been dealing with them all of my life. It's important to be heard, to be seen, and to be taken seriously, and not to be lectured or given advice or made belittled. but really help to grow. So what you've been doing so beautifully is you've educated me in a way that was helpful to where I was at. And you gave me a lot of confidence by just asking me the right questions on where do I want to go, giving me homework to think, all right, what's the next step? What do I want to achieve? You didn't do it for me, we did it together, in a way that um, eventually will set me up, or is setting me up, that I can do it on my own, right?
Mm.
And but I can still tap back in to come to you if you. I think I'm back at a limit where I need more professional advice. And so it's really hand in hand, but also helping me to be independent.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that. It's all about really providing the financial empowerment and the financial independency to help you move forward. So thanks for sharing that with our
Absolutely.
listeners. So finally, Daphne, you often talk about having a vision for your life and finances. So how does having that bigger purpose help to ground us when these feelings arise?
Yeah, that purpose, that vision of where do I want to be, financially, but also really as a person, as a human being. Once I know that, I can almost make it through anything. It's greater than just, what's ahead of my day, what's in my year to come, but it's really a guiding star, a principle. What's my purpose as a person? What do I want to achieve on in this world? And how does that translate to how I'm doing with my friends, what I'm doing with my family, what I'm doing in my leisure time, what I'm doing with my finances to be able to do that. Yeah, hugely important.
Hmm. Thank you so much, Daphne. This has been such an insightful conversation. And I think the key takeaway is that these feelings are common, but we don't have to control our financial futures. Everyone deserves to feel confident and capable with their money. So, what would be the one final message of empowerment you'd like to leave our listeners with today?
Yeah. So you're not alone. It happens to everyone. It's not special. It's not something you should be worrying about. It's really common. Let's normalize it. Let's talk about it, and put something in motion. Put a strategy in place to get out of it.
Yeah, super. Thank you so much, Daphne, for sharing your wisdom and experience with us today. So, for our
Thank you.
listeners who want to delve deeper into this topic of imposter phenomenon and take more concrete steps, Daphne has a fantastic book. We're going to include a link in the show notes, and we really encourage you all to check it out and continue your financial towards your financial confidence as well, and not just only financial confidence, but all aspects of your well-being and confidence. And Daphne is an amazing, amazing coach. And if you're really feeling inspired to take the next step in your financial journey and want personalized support to build a solid financial plan and investment strategy, so we are here at Pace Up Invest. And as you've heard today, those feeling of uncertainty can really hold us back. But with the right guidance, like Daphne mentioned, you can move forward with clarity and confidence, and will help you to create a tailored financial plans and investment strategies that really align with your goals, helping you overcome those initial hurdles and build a secure future. So, like I mentioned, you're going to see the link for Daphne's book in the notes. But also, if you want to learn more about Pace Up Invest and how we can support you in building your financial confidence and achieving your goals, we're going to put the link in the notes as well. So, join us next time on Money Conversation with Everyday People for more empowering discussions about our relationship with money.